Okay, let's go over how to solve the problems on the back of your notes. So the first problem, what you're going to need to do is find true equations. So what do I mean by that? Using the properties that we went over on the front, can you come up with two equations? So it has to have an equal sign and it's got to be equal on both sides that are true for this parallelogram. So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of look at it, see if you can come up with some equations. Okay, so as you are looking, we need to find x and y. So we have two variables, so this might give you a hint that we need to use systems of equations. So that's where you either use substitution or elimination. So for those types of problems, you need two equations. Could we come up with three different equations here? Yes, but we only need two of them. So the two that I'm going to choose is I'm going to use property number 3. So property number 3 tells us that opposite angles are congruent. So that means I can say 2y equals x minus y. Okay, and I can say that because of property number 3. Okay, the next equation that I'm going to come up with is using property number 4 that tells us that consecutive angles are supplementary. So that's property number 4. So then I can write this equation here, that 3x minus 40 plus 2y equals 180, and that is because of property number 4. I have two equations now, and in order to solve, I either need to use substitution or elimination. The choice is yours. Remember, you're finding two variables. You got to figure out what x and y are. I'm going to leave you with that to work that out. At the very end, I'll come back and give my answers. So if you want to pause and solve it, that's fine, but we are going on to problem number 2. So problem number 2, anytime that there is no diagram or picture for these problems, I like to draw one. So I'm going to draw just a small parallelogram, and I'm going to label it PQRS. And you want to start with P, and then you have to go, the next vertice should be Q, then R, then S. Okay, and then angle P, I'm going to mark blue, and I'm also going to underline it here. R, angle R, I'm also going to label blue because I know P and R are congruent. Why? Well, property number 3 tells us so. And then last, angle S, I know is different than P and R, so I'm going to label it red. And it says find all the possible values of x and y. Well, when I look at this problem, there's a couple things I noticed. I noticed that there's two variables, so maybe I have to use substitution or elimination. But then I see these squared. Okay, so whenever you see a squared, so like 2x squared or y squared, you should think we have to use either the quadratic formula or X-Men. So whenever you see squared, that's what you're going to use. That's what you need to solve. So I already said it before, the blue angles are congruent because of property number 3. So I can start there. I can say angle P and angle R are congruent to each other. So I could set up an equation like this. Y squared minus 18 equals 8y plus 2. Okay, so angle R is equal to angle P. Now this is not in the form that you need to have it in order to do X-Men. Okay, remember this form looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you need it all on one side and for it to equal 0. Again, I'm just going to give you a start to this. You are going to come up with 2 values for y. And again, I'll go over this problem at the end. So that's the first equation to figure out y. The second equation is a little bit more tricky, and we'll come back to that at the end. Okay, because we need to first figure out what y equals. Okay, next one. So here it is saying that this length right here is 4x plus 16. And this length right here is x squared minus 2x. So what do we know about those two lengths? Well, property number 5 says that diagonals bisect each other. So those two lengths are congruent to each other. So we can set up an equation. We can set up x squared minus 2x equals 4x plus 16. Notice the squared, which means that we're going to have to do x-men here. Okay, so you can go ahead and try that one. And then we also have the other one, which says that y squared equals 25. So that could be our second one that we're going to look at. And you can solve for that. Again, I'll come back to it at the end to give the answers. Okay, last but not least, it says determine if DEFG is a parallelogram. Show if the sides are parallel using the slope formula, and if the diagonals meet at the same point. That's using the midpoint formula. So, again, we don't have a diagram. Let's draw a diagram. And this time I'm actually going to label it. So I'm going to label it -1, 1. This is D. And E is 2, 4. I think this would just be easier when we're using the slope formula and the midpoint formula to see which points are where. F. And then G. Okay, so first thing, let's just use the slope formula. We need to see if this line or this side is parallel to this side. So we need to see if DE, the slope of DE is the same as the slope of GF by using the slope formula. So this is all going to be on slope. So first thing I would do is plug the points into the slope formula. So for DE, it's going to be 4 minus 1 over 2 plus 1. And for GF, it's going to be 4 minus 1 over 6 minus 3. We're going to get 3 over 3. And here we also get 3 over 3. Those both simplify to 1. They have the same slope. If they have the same slope, then they're parallel. So good there. Now we have to see if the other two sides are congruent. So now we're looking at DG. So let's find the slope of DG and the slope of GF. Okay, I'll let you figure those two slopes out, and we'll come back to it. And then the last one, we need to figure out the midpoint. Okay, so what is the midpoint of GE? So if we have line GE, what is the midpoint? We're going to look at the midpoint formula, which tells us we have to do 2 plus 3, so that's our x values divided by 2, over 4 plus 1 divided by 2 for our y values. So that comes out to 5 over 2 and 5 over 2. So the midpoint is 5 over 2 and 5 over 2. We still need to find the midpoint of DF. I'm going to let you solve that. And again, you can just pause the video, complete the rest of these problems, and then unpause it to get the answers. Okay, so let's go over these answers. For number 1, I chose to use a substitution. You could use elimination. Should have got that x equals 60 and y equals 20. Number 2, we weren't completely finished with, so you should have solved for y, and you should have got 2 answers. You should have got y equals 10 and y equals negative 2. So once we have these 2 answers, let's plug it in and see what happens. So if I plug in 10 to angle P, right, what do I get? I get 82 degrees. That makes sense. Now let's try the other answer, negative 2. If I plug that in, 8 times negative 2 is negative 16, plus 2 is negative 14. Can we have a negative angle? We can't. We can't have a negative angle, so negative 2 is not going to work. We have to use 10. We're going to have to use 10, which tells us that angle P and angle R are both 82 degrees. Okay. Now this is going to help us to find angle S. So if those two are 82 degrees, what's the relationship between P and S? Well, that is property number 4 that tells us that they are supplementary. So we can say that 2x squared, that's angle S, plus angle P, or angle R, equals 180. Okay, so then we get 2x squared equals 98. Divide 2 on both sides, we get x squared equals 49. Take the square root of both sides, we get x equals 7 and negative 7. We get 2 answers. Let's go ahead and check both of those answers, see if they work. If I plug 7 in for angle S, I get 7 times 7 is 49 times 2 is 98. That works. What about negative 7? Negative 7 times negative 7, that's positive 49 times 2 is 98. So that also works, which means that our possible values for x are 7 and negative 7, and our possible values for y is just 10. Okay, moving on to the next one. So this one, we come across that we have 4 different answers. Let's just double check that we can use them all. Let's start with the x. So x equals 8 and x equals negative 2. So x equals 8. Let's plug it in. If we plug it in, let's plug it into 4x plus 2. So we'll get 4 times 8 is 32 plus 16 is 48. So that works. Does it work up at the top? 8 times 8 is 64. Minus 16 is 48. So 8 works, but does negative 2 work? Let's see if negative 2 works. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. Plus 16 is 8. So it works with the one that I have circled down here. But does negative 2 work with this one? So we'll have to say negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4 plus 4. Yeah, they both work. They both come out to be 8. So even though I have a negative answer, that does not mean that it's not going to work. Okay, so you have to plug it in, make sure. Same with the other one, we get 5 and negative 5. If we plug those back in for y, we get the same answer, 25. Those check out. So for this problem, we have 4 different answers, 4 different possible answers. Okay, and last but not least, when we find the slope of DG and the slope of when we find the slope of DG and GF, we notice that they're both 0, which works. So opposite sides are parallel. Both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, which is good. And then we have to check about the midpoint. So we found the midpoint of DF. So as you can see, it's the same here. which means they meet at this point, and they both are bisected, which means it's a parallelogram. Okay, email me with any questions.